trauma of exile. But I want to start with a 3-minute clip. And if we can bring the lights down, possible. Oh my goodness. This is not fair. We are in Berlin. Too loud?
Yeah, that's
I saw you doing that.
Okay, I was like, how'd you know that?
Oh, just a second.
So that you don't have
resist until what? Or until America? Or until the Black Panther Party? It's just not true. The first thing that the Black Panther Party did, of course, in Oakland was to patrol the community, to set up an armed patrol in order to ensure that Black people were not harassed and intimidated by the local police department. But that wasn't done in the South. It was done in Birmingham. My father participated in armed patrols because they had to protect the community. They get out every night in shifts, of course, with their weapons, and they drive around the community to make sure there weren't any strange races there to bomb. Because they bombed houses all over. As I've said on numerous occasions, my earliest childhood memories are bound up with the sounds of dynamite.
In Cuba, at the high school, we had meetings and we would talk about Angela Davis being in jail and that we wanted her freedom. Because Angela Davis has able to, and all the Black Panthers do have the Afro. I grew up, my Afro hair. Of course, that was a problem in the high school because nobody else had the Afro, and so I became identified. I empowered myself with my own hair, with having the Afro, and also with the idea of that fighting from being an Afro-descendant and from the Black movement. It was an important element for me. It was an important part of my life. But also at the same time, I hear about the Stonewall movement and the gay riots, and that my connection with my identity as being an Afro-descendant and an Afro-descendant of diverse sexuality during that moment in Cuba, being 12, 13 years old as I was, it was very important to me because it opened the road for my own self-liberation. Choco Bunny. Okay, so just I want to show that, and what I'm going to follow with is that I'm going to talk about the different decolonial creative strategies that I use in the production of this large project, which is actually, you know, it's a video. I did a piece yesterday but also I have a written text of more than 50 pages. And so I'm just gonna go and you know, and I'm gonna be really fast. So forgive me if I but one of the most important things for me to understand was the importance of understanding how modernity and coloniality were hooked up together, and how, because the whole notion of coloniality and being trained in the United States in a fine art, European model of art, I couldn't have access to a lot of the information that my ancestor has. For example, African Yoruba geometry, understanding of time and space. And so in my decolonial process, I have learned on my own, through my process, all this information that have brought me to the kind of art process or creative process that I'm doing right now. And so I want, this one of the colonial creative strategies that I have employed in this work, and I just may go understanding what modernity and coloniality is. We have talked, I mean, Nia was talking about how our ancestor made Europe so rich, and we didn't, you know, our ancestor never got paid. Europe is still today being rich out of the money that took our exploitation of our bodies, and understanding that this richness that Europe has right now, they never talk about how enslavement, you know, it is not visible in the European discourse about how they got rich because of the exploitation of our bodies. So that, but understanding also that with that modernity, coloniality, there are certain issues, certain epistemic issues about how, for the European mind,
Just a little,
you don't have to be that close.
But actually,
Yeah.
you know, this is very difficult because the technician should be there manipulating this, not me. You know, I should be doing my.
I'm sorry.
You know, yes. Well, I'm sorry too that this is happening, but then maybe I can talk like this, and then I don't need a microphone. So in that process, that understanding that Eurocentrism have placed our cultures as being primitive, not modern, is, you know, is traditional, and all these anthropological conceptions of what African and not African, Arab, you know, Asian culture have been placed in this Eurocentric epistemic model. And for me, it was really important to transgress that space and understanding that I don't need to be in this conception of progress and being in the vanguard as this neurotic obsession that the Western has, because the progress is connected with the destruction of the earth. Development is with the destruction of the environment, but a destruction of the people too. So that understanding, the importance of understanding how modernity and coloniality are connected with it, and how this whole notion of being modern, what it means to be modern in the European mind, you know, and so it did liberate me a lot from that idea of trying to be in the front, trying to be in the vanguard, trying to invent something new, you know. So that was important as a colonial strategy. As that came the whole issue of transmodernity, which is a transmodernity comes out of a Argentinian living in Mexico philosopher, Enrique Dussel, who I had the chance in 2008 to hear him at in Mexico City to talk about how this importance of place our understanding of history outside the 500 years of colonization that Europe has placed upon us. So that idea, it expanded my creative process and my understanding of history, not only to go back to understand the influence of Yoruba and Lokumi and Arab into not my personal life, but also into the understanding of the territory where I grew up, but also on the understanding of the Taínos and the Mayas as being part of the knowledge that I need to enter
as being transmodern and getting away, and the link from this notion, this Eurocentric notion of modernity. And out of that then came the whole notion of cimarronaje. Cimarronaje is a strategic liberation process that took place in the Americas, in the Afro diaspora, in which, and it happens in the United States, in the Caribbean, Brazil, Colombia, you know, where the slaves, they didn't tell anybody that they were going to run away. It all happens in the mind. And that it helped me to connect with Fanon and the whole idea that decolonization is a creative process. So I really understand that my act of the linking from Western epistemology and understanding of time was an act of cimarronaje. I empower with that and say, no, I'm running away like the slave. And in my films, in my work, I have this whole traces and narrative trace of like running away and keep running away and running away until I get to the ocean as a way of connecting myself with the notion of cimarronaje. Because I think that other species doing that, this notion of remembering in order to detach, not only to go back and to say, oh, that was the past, and you know, but that's kind of the strategies that are. Balanquet, which is the notion of understanding that we are not only alone, you know, we belong to not one community but many communities. And when the African slaves, they run away and they got free, they create towns and territories. I mean, Robbie was talking about situating ourselves. I think that it's really important to locate ourselves in territories that are our own imaginary territories. To the link from this Cartesian idea for the construction of a space. That is the notion of a Balanquet in a creative process. And then the notion of ancestrality. For me, it was also really important because of, like, in my fight on understanding my sexuality, you know, I always was going to Foucault, to Jude de Battle, and it was on my understanding that how the African myth, how the notion of the erotic and Audre Lorde was really important in that process. It opened me the road to understand that in that process of understanding the ancestrality, I arrived to the Dogon people. To understand that the first astronomers that we had thousands of years ago and were really goddamn good astronomers were the Dogon people. And the Dogon people in the creation, the myth of creation, is an androgynous myth. There is no male and female, because male and female is a Western construction from the 1800s. So I understand the fluidity of sexuality, and that ancestrality arriving to that space allowed me to really break away from this whole gender notion, this Western construction of gender notion, and sexuality as being a physical reproduction, a scientific thing. And so then I'm just going to stop there because maybe later we can talk about the other stuff.